Hello, Lauren. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for coming down and taking the long journey from Cambridge all the way down here
Yep.
for today. So the first question I ask everyone on the podcast is a little bit about their earliest memory of alcohol. So could you tell me about your earliest memory of alcohol?
Yes. So, earliest memory, growing up, both my parents drank. So, my mom, she loves beer, or loved rather. She's sober now too, which is
Wow.
really cool. We'll
Amazing.
talk about that later. But my dad, he loved Merlot. So I always was exposed to it at an early age and like knew what it did, what it was. And then my earliest like memory drinking personally was when I was 13. I can remember I had this best friend that lived down the street, like 2 doors down, which was ideal. And yeah, her and I were like this. And so we kind of did everything together. But yeah, first time drinking was when I was 13. We were in a Denny's parking lot, so like a diner.
Right, okay.
With some boys that were older than us, which had no business doing, who bought alcohol, and yeah, I got pretty drunk off vodka, and it was strawberry flavored, which was so gross. And I got sick, and I just was like, I don't understand why people like this, but
What's the culture like? Obviously, you're from Arizona, so people listening might not have realised, but obviously the UK culture is very similar to that. Like a lot of people, 13, 14, they go to the local park or, like you said, a car park, wait for someone to buy them alcohol, and then they start drinking. So what's the culture like in Arizona?
Yeah, it's similar. I would say the biggest difference is that our drinking age is 21, whereas is yours 18?
18, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you have a couple more years before you can actually like full-fledged decide whether or not you're going to drink, but still like same culture in when you're a teenager. I feel like that's kind of what you do. Go to the mall or the movies and see who can find what, and yeah.
Yeah, you get sort of, because that's a similar thing to me. Like my experience first time I drank was in a park. We waited on a street corner.
Yep.
One of our friends asked someone to buy us alcohol. Went to the park, and then I got so drunk, don't remember anything. Was sick everywhere. Had to get picked up by my mum and dad. But how did you feel in that first sort of experience of drinking? What did it make you feel like?
Yeah, I think I felt like weirdly, like almost proud, like it was a rite of passage. Like it was this moment where I was like, I know what I'm doing. Even though I had no idea what I was doing, because vodka is disgusting, especially when it's like bad vodka and it's just drinking it straight like that. But I think, it made me like this sense of kind of ticking something off my list of like, I've done that before.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you said, like a rite of passage, which I think we have the same thing in the UK as well.
Yeah.
Everyone, it's like a badge of honor, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
my first time drinking. So how did your relationship with alcohol sort of evolve through the years? So you spoke a little bit about when you're 21 and you're allowed to go out. What was your relationship like with alcohol growing up through that period?
Yeah, so going back to high school, Lauren, or that was middle school. So 13, 14 years old, I think I would drink kind of sporadically. Again, we called what you said, asking someone random from the park, we'd call it, "Hey, mister."
Okay.
So we would stand outside of a gas station or petrol station and say like, "Hey, mister, can you buy me cigarettes or alcohol?" And if someone had approached me now doing that, I would say absolutely not. But the fact that people do that for like young people or teens, like, I don't know, different times. But yeah, so I think would just drink kind of here and there. I also got really into smoking weed. So shortly after my first time drinking alcohol, I would say probably within the same, couple months time frame, I also smoked weed for the first time. And I continued like that. I was like, this I'm really into. So I smoked quite a bit throughout my like early developmental years and formative years, especially as a teen. And the thing is too, is like my dad smoked weed. Okay. So it was like allowed.
Yeah.
I remember the first time he caught me smoking I was on the side of the house smoking weed, and he had come out to have a cigarette, and he just kind of like looked at me and I looked at him and didn't say anything. and then went back inside and, you know, we were making dinner later and he was like, so did you finish your homework? Like it just never was brought up.
Yeah, yeah.
So I knew I wasn't going to get in trouble for it. So I just did it. And then I would just like take his, which was a weird dynamic. So yeah, I would smoke and then, yeah, drink as well throughout high school. I think parties, you know, you would house parties were what we did on the weekends. There was also like big abandoned kind of like fields. So you would just have bonfire parties and kind of like the movies, honestly. Like you would just go and meet up with friends and drink. And then I was at a festival when I was 17, and that was the first time I got a like minor in consumption, which is our.
Wait, what does that mean?
It's like underage drinking.
Okay.
So you get basically, if you get enough of them, it could become like a misdemeanor or a felony.
Okay.
So I racked up 2 when I was 17, and my dad was so pissed.
Yeah.
So he was like, you need to get a job to pay for these because I'm not paying your fines.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would party, I think, like any normal teenager. And then, you know, I also then started kind of experimenting with other things, other drugs growing up. And again, like because I was allowed at his house, our house became the party house. So for friends' birthdays, like he would, special occasions, get us like a keg or 2 kegs.
Yeah.
And so then I started throwing the parties. So that essentially was how I kind of kick-started this full-blown long-term relationship, I would say, with alcohol.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. You touched on, obviously, like the weed and smoking weed and your dad not mentioning it as well. And you've made a really interesting point about like being in formative years.
Mm-hmm.
I think we as a culture or society generally tend to sort of just brush over the fact that we spend our teens getting really fucked up and then expect us to sort of come out the end of it normal. Do you think that had an effect on sort of the person you are today as well?
Absolutely. I think looking back, you think you know what you're doing and you are making these decisions, which are quite frankly poor decisions. And those are the things that are going to set you up for when you become an adult and college, for instance. So I remember at school in high school, senior year, they would have counselors come in from different schools, and it was like a recruitment thing where you would try to, I'm sure you have something similar in the UK.
Don't think we
where
did,
it's like,
to be fair.
They talk about which uni
like
you're going to go to.
Fair and stuff. Like, sort of to say these are the options you have after school.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And I just blew it off. Like I had no interest in what was going to become my future. And in that moment, I just couldn't care less about it. And so eventually I kind of got my head out of my ass and went to college, but that was way later on in my life. Whereas like I had a bunch of friends going to college or university and I didn't. And it just was like something because my parents didn't go, like no one was telling me, Lauren, you should go.
Yeah.
So of course I wasn't going to.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so what did you do when you left school then? Where did you end up and how did you sort of get to where you are today, I guess?
Yeah, I started working right out of, as soon as I turned 18, I got a job in sales. Like a lot of people, I think, who don't go to college do.
They always say that it's like get a job in sales if you've got no qualifications.
Yeah.
Or construction.
Yeah, exactly. So got a job in sales, and I will say though, like I remember this is my interview. I had never proper interview before, so I had Googled how to make a CV, and then I had college jobs. I worked at a pizza place, or not college, sorry, high school jobs, pizza place, or I worked at a skateboarding shop, but this was like an actual office job. So I figured out how to make a CV. I didn't own any business clothes, so I went and thrifted some slacks and like a button up before my interview. And I just walked in there and got this job. And by then I was like 18 years old making, 40 grand a year. And I was like, I don't need to go to college. Like, this is
Yeah.
sick. Like, for me back then, that was a lot of money. And it still is a lot of money, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So I did get a sense of responsibility in that regard. And I'm really glad. I think work is another thing that's always kind of been my constant. Like,
Yeah.
I've always, from there, it's just my career has excelled. But I think that kept me from going in some of the directions that I saw my friends from school going in.
Yeah.
And some of them like aren't even alive anymore. And so it was just, that was like my differentiator. I had that responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting though, because I've spoken about this quite a lot before, because somebody has a job that they're holding down.
Yeah.
They've got, money, which is something that society says you must be successful if you have money. They're driving around in a car.
Yep.
They cannot have an issue with alcohol or drugs. It's just not a thing. But obviously, I know, and I guess you know as well, that, just because you're holding stuff down at like what I call now like a base level. So like
Totally.
my base level was actually like really down here before I got sober. And you think because everything in your life is going okay, that it's okay. But
Yeah.
did you find that on your journey through, drugs and alcohol, did you find that because you had that job, you mentioned it as well, you're earning good money for your age, like that's crazy money at 18, you've got little to no responsibility, you're probably giving your parents a tiny bit of rent, but the rest of it is disposable income.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was making more than my parents were.
Yeah.
And I was like, I moved out of the house like as soon as week after graduation out.
Yeah.
So I wasn't paying rent, but I stayed at that company for 7 years, and I met some amazing people, some of my best friends still. They're all back in the States, but it was such an opportunity for me, honestly. But to your point, the drugs and the partying and everything didn't go away. In fact, sales culture is incredibly boozy.
Yes.
And especially when you're young, that's like how you celebrate wins. Like you literally ring a gong and then cheers a beer. Like it was very much that.
That Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, to answer your question with the baseline, I absolutely resonate with that, just because it's still, I think that's what a lot of people, just because you have what looks to be success on the outside, on the inside, I mean, you can hold down a lot of things. And I'm fortunate that I didn't necessarily like lose a job to my drinking habits, but I mean, there've been times, not any time recent, but over, my 20s, where I would like drink before work or at lunch and stuff. Like it got pretty dark.
Yeah. So I mean, how could you tell us a little bit more about that? So obviously you got to a point eventually where you decided enough was enough, but what was the journey to get there?
Yeah. So I turned 21, and that's when I was allowed to legally drink. That's when I didn't have to ask people to buy me alcohol or sneak from whoever or coordinate. So at that point, that's when my drinking like really became front and center. My then boyfriend told me that my 21st birthday lasted a whole year, and like meaning I just partied for the whole year.
Yeah.
And so I would party quite a bit, drink often, go out to bars, clubs, nightclubs, festivals. And then I did that for all of my 20s. But I think the early stages of drinking, like drinking culture in the States is like pub culture, where you go to a bar, a sports bar, or you go to a nightclub, and your mission at that time is to get as absolutely hammered as possible.
Yeah.
And, you have these almost like people glorify it, just the nights out that are never as fun as they make it out to be, And so doing that for nearly a decade was what I did. But then I met this guy at work, and he was also a big drinker. And we got into a relationship, and we got married, which is a whole other part of my story too, which I'm sure we'll get to. But yeah, so from the time I was like after work, just drinking quite a bit. And I think back then too, like I started to have this love for craft beer. So in Arizona, the brewery scene is like really big. And where I lived, I was in like a 3-mile radius where there was like 6 different breweries. So you would just go and drink beer and hang out. And when I say drink beer, I don't mean like 2 or 3. I mean like I could put away 8, 9, 10 beers,
Yeah, and
pints
you're only
in a
like
night.
small girl.
Yeah, I'm a
you
small
know?
girl. I could just, and that's what sometimes I've been listening to, through getting sober, you become educated of what alcohol does to you. And for people who have addictive tendencies, like it almost like energized me. Like a flip would switch and I just could stay up all night drinking, and I did. So yeah, that was a lot of my 20s.
I think that's I resonate with that sort of energizing thing, because people would always see the crazy side of me,
Yeah.
and they were like, "Fucking hell, you're so much fun when you've had a drink." And I was the life and soul of the party,
Yeah.
and I kind of built I guess like a character around myself, that when I drunk, I become this version of Nick that everybody loved because he was funny. Well, I thought he was funny. He was a bit of a twat.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah. I know
thought
looking back, you're like,
yeah,
oh my gosh.
fucking hell, it wasn't funny. It was embarrassing. But I did that, and a lot of people kind of lent on that as well. So I was always reliable for that thing. So if someone wanted to have a drink, they knew they could ring me, and no matter what I was doing, I could move stuff around and I could be there.
Yeah.
I guess, you were saying that was in your 20s, and you said you got married as well, which,
Yeah.
that's a part of, obviously, a massive part of your story.
Yep.
And did the alcohol and drugs play a part in your marriage, sort of breaking down eventually? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to get to that point, you have to kind of go to the start.
Yeah.
So I met my ex-husband, like I said, at work, and our first time ever going out together was at a brewery, and he had a big love of beer too. I did as well. And very quickly, like he had just bought in his own flat and had fully stocked the beer or the fridge with beer. I think we went through it literally in 2 days. Like him and I we enabled each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the foundation of our relationship, was drinking. So we were together in total for 4 years, but so we were dating for a year and a half before we got engaged. All of our relationships were centered around alcohol. Our friend group, like that's what we did to have fun, was just go out and party. But I think more so him and I were also both alone drinkers. So like we didn't always just drink when we were out with friends. Like we would both drink alone or together. So, there was times where we both would just get so hammered, and then you become a different person. Parts of me sometimes would become mean, and same for him. And we would just like, you say things that are just horrible. And, it got like bad. But basically we still, even when we got engaged, like there was so many times where, I mean, I was crazy too. Like there was times where we would be fighting and driving, and he'd pull up at a stoplight and I would just jump out of the car and like there's traffic, like just stuff that you wouldn't normally ever do.
Yeah, of course.
So I think, but both of our own individual relationships with alcohol, we both had struggles and we both really drank a lot. And so to put those two things together, it was just really difficult. And so, even our wedding, it was like a big wedding because his parents wanted a big wedding. And I'm smiling because I didn't necessarily. And so I think, we still went on with it, and big boozy night. I mean, there was 150 people at my wedding. Like it was a big one. And I just, after we were married, like nothing changed. We both had quite a bit of struggle, and I think our fighting got even worse, and it was to a point where kind of punching walls and stuff, like holes in walls. And, he was never violent toward me and I was never to him, but like we both had this just
pent up frustration,
pent up
isn't it?
frustration, and we just both were becoming versions of ourselves that I think neither of us wanted, but didn't know how to get out of at the time because I was 26.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, it definitely, and it led to that, got to a point where, and I remember a time too, like he called it out and he was like, I think we need to slow down on our drinking. I think we need to, not do this anymore. And I was like, what? No, like, if you want to be sober, you can do that. Like, I just wasn't in a state of mind ever to hear that.
Yeah.
And so he would get on like little challenges that he would do, or like fitness challenges and stuff, but I was just not in that mindset. And then, yeah, what finally kind of like, this is where my drinking, I would say, really got to the darkest points of my life was in 2019. We had been married for not even a year, and my dad had got diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. And I just was so hurt by that. And I just was like, oh, shit, like, this is not good. And so I basically just, that's when I became like even worse, if possible, with it. My drinking got even more reckless. And so, yes, that's when our marriage pretty much ended.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's quite a natural reaction, which is a weird thing to say. But I think we're never really taught how to deal with any sort of grief growing up. We're never taught how to deal with the fact that, people that you love aren't always going to be around. Like
Right.
you're just told from a young age that everything's okay.
Yeah.
The world's okay, and you're not really taught how to deal with things. And a common way to deal with things that I used, and sounds like you used as well, was drugs and alcohol was the biggest escape for me. It made me forget about everything, like I would be going through any sort of tough time and it was a crutch that was there and it was always there,
Yeah.
There was always, I could rely on it to be there. I didn't have to call it up and make sure they were ready to listen to me feel like shit. It was something that was an instant gratification. It was like, okay, that's gone away for now. But I think, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But when you get sober, you realize that all you're really doing is pushing down and suppressing feelings that are gonna come up
Oh, they are
one way
gonna
or
come
another
back.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't hide those feelings.
Yeah.
But I guess there's obviously another part of your story, which is you're here today.
Yeah.
You lived in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
How does Lauren end up sitting on this podcast talking to me?
Yeah, good question. So I think too, like, okay, so getting like really into that time of my life, because they coincided.
Okay.
So essentially found out my dad had cancer, was incredibly just distraught. I actually found out the night before I was supposed to come to my trip to England that I told you about, or sorry, not England, just Europe.
Yes.
Because I had this will make sense. But so I found out right before I was supposed to leave, like literally night before. My dad calls me and was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I just was diagnosed. And I'm like standing in my kitchen, just I think just all of the like blood from my body just kind of just like drains, and I'm just like, okay, well, I'm supposed to leave. Like, do you want me to come be with you? What can I do? And he was like, no. You've never been to Europe. You've been planning this. Like, go. I'll be here when you get back. So I take a trip to, abroad, and one of our stops was Munich, Oktoberfest. And yeah, I was out at a tent and I met a guy who is now my partner of 4 years.
Wow.
And yeah, he was the first person that I told, like a stranger, and just kind of like realizing that like my dad is ill, that had cancer. And my partner's name is Joe. Joe was just like really there and very, there was something about him. So I met him and I was like, I will regret it for my life if I don't keep in contact with you. And so we did. But basically, yeah, long story short, I got home and my dad had passed from cancer 1 month from that phone call.
Wow.
So I had a couple weeks with him. And I was at the hospital day in and day out because he wasn't remarried. So I was his, and I'm the oldest daughter. I have 2 brothers. So I was his like power of attorney and like had to make all the decisions of putting him into hospice or, helping write his will, like things that he hadn't done because he didn't think he was going to die at 56. So it was just like a really hard time. And I was drinking a lot, like a lot. There was a period where I was sneaking in like wine shooters, like little mini wine bottles into the hospital. And like I would be sitting on the bed in the hospital room. My dad was in his cot and I would just be drinking. And the nurse like caught me and she was like, twice. The first time she warned me. The second time she was like, if I find you drinking in here again, you're not allowed to come back. So I was like, okay. So I still did it. But my dad passed and then it was his funeral. And then I just continued again to like, I was hurting so bad. And my partner now, Joe, and he helped me through it from afar. And it was nice because I think I had like the physical space and everything I needed to be alone. And like I wasn't 100% alone. I had my mom and like my friends. But and then to answer your question, we just kept in touch. And then I moved here 2 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing, really, that I think when you meet your person, don't you? And like you have this weird sense of drawing you back to the person. So like in the way I relate to that is with my partner. I met her on a holiday. It was a boys' holiday that I was on, and she was on a girls' holiday. It was in Croatia, and it was our first night and their last night. So we was going fucking mental. Obviously, that was like crazy. She was on like a bit of a come down, spoke for like 5-10 minutes. And then we just started messaging again, like similar thing.
Yeah.
And she actually went traveling for 6 months, and we did the same thing. We kept in contact, and we wasn't together or anything, but we just were drawn back to each other.
Yeah.
And then she literally come back and was around Christmas time and was like, oh, I'm back. Do you want to meet up for a drink? I was like, yeah. And then that was like 6 years ago. We've been together ever since.
Wow.
And I think having somebody by your side through those challenges. Mm-hmm. Who you just feel safe and comfortable with is like the biggest game changer.
100%.
Yeah, and I think so. Obviously, you spoke a little bit about your drinking there because I really want to get onto all of the amazing stuff that sobriety's brought you.
Yeah.
What point did you decide that enough was enough, and you decided that actually I'm going to knock this on the head? Yeah.
So going back to that time. It was end of 2019 and then 2020. And then, we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
I think some people got sober, which I love that for them. I did not.
My drug dealer got really busy in 2020.
Yeah, exactly. Some of us were like struggling. We all were, but coping poorly. So I was now freshly divorced. I was just living alone for the first time in my adult life, which is the best thing I've ever done for myself. I needed to be alone in that I needed to get my independence. I needed to get my identity back a bit. But when you're alone, there's no one telling you how much you should and shouldn't drink.
Yeah.
Except for yourself. So I still continued to just drink. And then there was a couple of like just scary moments in that time in the 2020. I one time backed into my neighbor's car, like, because I was intoxicated, like that kind of stuff, where I was just like, this is becoming a problem. Like, I would wake up and I would start drinking. And then especially, you just, there was like no rules, it felt like.
No, it's like, like airport rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, where like people are drinking, that was 2020. Yeah.
That was it. So it was that. And then I did one of those challenges where I was like, right, because I started to, that's when my conscience started to say, like, maybe you need to cool off. Like, maybe this is getting a bit
mad.
bit dark. Yeah. So in September 2020, I was like, right, I'm going to do 30 days. I can do this. Sober September. And I lasted 28 days. I counted down every single day too. I was like, so it was a mindset thing. It was like, I'm doing 30 days just to prove to myself that I don't have a problem. I made it 28 and then I got totally wasted and, so that's when I think the seed started to kind of grow or be planted rather. And then, yeah, just continued again to 2021, still was drinking like never before. And then 2022, I moved here. And I think subconsciously I was like, England's a boozy country. London's a very boozy city.
Yeah.
So, but again, like I was like, I'll just fit in. These are my people. I love beer.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple good months. And then I just started to realize like I was not loving the person I was. I really just started feeling like this, just not myself after a while, and started realizing that these old habits that I had in my marriage were starting to take form in my new relationship. And I was like, I'm not making the same mistake twice. And so I did, again, I would start to do little spurts of like, I'll do 3 weeks here, 6 weeks. No, I never made 6 weeks. I think 3 weeks was probably like the most
Still
I could
going.
ever do. Yeah.
3 weeks, yeah.
But that constant chatter where you're like negotiating with yourself. Like, I'm going to take a break off this weekend and then I'll be good.
Yeah.
I did that forever. And then, so I did that. And then up until 347 days ago, is when I finally had my last drink. So to answer your question too, I think it was a lot of trial and error.
Yes.
And there was a long period of time where I just wasn't ready to hear it. But then for the last 4 years, I've been kind of toying with the idea of sobriety. And there's been times where even in the depths of my drinking, I knew I was an addict because I didn't drink like the people next to me. And that I knew I needed to be sober at some point in my life. Like I just knew.
Yeah. You know what? It's so funny you say that. I experienced the exact same thing. And I remember my partner would tell me like, Nick, you're like, everyone thinks you're normal, but like what you're doing is not normal. And I would be like, yeah, I know, but it's all right. Like deep down, I knew it wasn't all right. And my mum actually said to me when I was younger, she's like, I really hope you don't get into drugs and alcohol because like your personality is just not gonna, you're not gonna suit that. Like she would give me like a Coke Zero or like a Coke when I was younger, and I'd down it in 2 seconds, be like, I want another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I was always like that. I was always like, I need more, I need this, I need that now.
I'm the same.
Give me this, give me that. Oh my God, I'm obsessed with football. No, I'm not. I'm obsessed with music. Now I'm obsessed with fucking BMXing. And it was like, I was just constantly obsessive over everything that I did. And I think you do, like the seed was planted in my head for ages. And I used to wake up every day and be like, nah, like, I don't want to do this anymore for probably 2 years before I was like, shit, this something really has to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a common thing in the sobriety world or anything that people are struggling with. I think everyone deep down knows that it's not good for them, but it's finding that inner strength, isn't it, to just make that change. So you've obviously decided to make that change. You've done your little 3 weeks stints and you planted the seed. How did you get sober? And tell us a little bit about like that journey. So did you say 300 and how many days?
347.
So you're coming up to the year mark.
Coming up to the year mark.
Which is exciting because hopefully this is going to go out on your year, which is going to be amazing.
By the time you hear this, I will be 1 year sober,
which
and
is
I am
amazing.
so grateful. I think how I got to this point now, it was very much sick of my own shit.
Yeah, literally.
like I would wake up head pounding, just wake up just in a fog, grumpy mood. And that's the other thing too, I think you talked about it, was just your kind of baseline is so much lower.
Yeah.
And I knew that, but I was like, for the longest time I didn't care. or maybe didn't see it, but then I started to care about that. I looked in the mirror and I just didn't even recognize who I had become. I mean, I looked so different. I was like a stone bigger. I've always been like a teeny girl, and that was abnormal, but years of hard drinking beer will
Yeah.
will do that to you.
Full of calories, that stuff.
Full of calories, yeah. But yeah, so I figured out, I was like, right, I don't love this life that I've made for myself. And so how did it start? Like, what really prompted it? I think I reluctantly listened to some podcasts.
Yeah.
Part of my living in England has been, I love just walking and seeing everything around me. It's, as someone who's not from here, I will forever get a kick out of how amazing this country is and how beautiful it can be. And so, I would just take these long walks around, and I started listening to some podcasts. I think I even searched how to quit drinking or whatever. And then I remember Andrew Huberman's podcast came on, the what alcohol does to your brain and body. And I remember listening to it, and I felt called out, and I was like, oh, because they talk about the average drinking of Americans, and then in my head I'm like, I'm triple that or quadruple that. Also, I don't know if this is standard too, but when you go to the doctor and you have to admit how many pints or whatever you drink. I had done that when I registered with a GP here, and they sent me a follow-up letter in the mail and was like, you need to, basically it was like, you drink something
too much.
Too much, yeah, you should.
Normally we lie. So normally I normally just lied. So I think every time I went to the doctors, they're like, are you taking drugs or drinking? I was like, nah, not really. Smashing Coke all the time. But I think I said, oh yeah, I have 10 pints a week, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
And I have maybe one or two of them on a Wednesday and then another one on a Thursday.
Yeah.
It's that's such a lie.
Yeah.
So I just lied.
See, I could have done that. Maybe I should have, but
no, maybe you didn't for a reason.
Yeah, and I remember I got that letter in the mail, and it was just basically telling me that I drink too much and you should look into this. And I was like, does every person in England get this? Or is
they should do.
Yeah. And I still have the letter. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, check. So listen to the podcast, felt called out, all these things started to then I became hyper aware of how much I was drinking. So I was like, okay, I'm only going to have 3 beers tonight instead of a whole 6-pack. That'll be good. That's good. So I would do that constantly. And then that just got so annoying. Having to it's the internal chatter that never stops of all of these things that you're shaming yourself for, you're rewarding yourself for. It's fucking tiring.
Exhausted.
Yeah. So that got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm like you, I'm all or nothing.
Yeah.
Either I'm in, I love something 100%, or I just don't do it at all.
Yeah, literally.
And so I think finally that's what prompted it. And then it wasn't like I set a date or anything. It wasn't like I just decided, okay, today I am sober. It was, though. I had come off a night of heavy drinking on a Friday night. That was the other thing, is my partner and I were just at home. It's not like we were out and about. We just got hammered at home on a Friday, woke up on a Saturday. It was a beautiful sunny day in England. And I was like, these are rare, and I'm too hungover to get outside right now. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So that was the last day I drank.
Amazing. Yeah. I think it's weird, isn't it, that it's wrong for so long, but no one can tell you. There's no amount of stuff that can happen. And then obviously you make that decision.
Yeah.
What's been some of the changes that you've noticed in your life? If you was to compare your life from drinking to not drinking. And another question I wanted to ask you was obviously time. You spend a lot of time drinking. So what have you done with your spare time now? Because you sound similar to me. I'm not sitting still. I'm doing something. And I know we're sitting right now, but we're still engaged in conversation, and I have to be doing things. So what's some of the benefits you've noticed and the differences, and also what do you do with all that time that you've probably gained?
Yeah, good question. I think I'm laughing because I'm convinced that people drink to pass time.
Yeah, literally.
It's out of boredom. That's why a lot of times why we do it. Think about every social event. Think of every party, whatever. Like, people have to have alcohol there first as like a social, lubricant or whatever. But really, like, and then even at home, when you go home after a long day of work, it's to pass time. So without it, you have so much time. So, I mean, like I've said, we all have the same amount of time in the day, but when you're sober, you do have time to
like, I feel like you get like an 8-day week rather than
exactly.
a 7-day week.
You kind of do.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but you do. And so early days was like whatever it took for me not to drink. So lots of walks.
Yeah.
And what else did I do, especially early days? I think, well, I've always been I've always been training, I feel like, in some shape or form since, my 20s. But, I joined I have this gym that I belong to in Cambridge. It's like a CrossFit gym.
I love that, by the way. You said you belong to it, so it's obviously a community.
It's such a community.
Yeah.
Seriously, amazing community. And it, I just like really ramped up my training because I was, again, like, I'm not sitting around drinking. So training, and that in itself, when you start to see like those benefits directly, like exercising when you haven't been drinking and your system is like fully functioning, and like how much better off you are for it, and your body just like feels so much better and is not hurting all the time, or when working out hungover just sucks.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not beneficial really.
no.
And I think some people, or what I would do is, if I was drinking quite a lot and working out, I'd be like, it was a way to punish my body. And now I see
Totally.
it as I guess it's like an honor really to be able to work out. Like, it's something that I get to do. It's not something that I have to do. Whereas before it was an offset of my lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it's like, to offset all of the shit that I've just put in my nose and down my throat, I'm going to go kill myself tomorrow.
Right.
Running.
Yeah, like a punishment.
Yeah,
it's so true. It's such a mindset thing. So I think just shifting that, and now I, just really look forward to it. I've made some amazing girlfriends there that I, get to see every week. And so that has been such a game changer for me. My fitness has just like, I'm doing things I've never been able to do, like pull-ups. I never was able to do those
I guess
before.
you like, because of, like you said, because you were so focused on it all that time.
Yeah.
It kind of like also gives you something to work towards, doesn't it? Having that goal. And I think, like, do you think that fitness has played a massive part in keeping you sober?
Yeah, I think it's helps your mind. Like, it's now when I go to the gym, I don't think about like, oh, how am I gonna look? Or, I mean, we all, as people and as women, I think we're always gonna have that and stigma. But really, it's for my mental health. Like, it is after a stressful day or whatever. I'm like, right, I can't wait to go to the gym for an hour. I get to just shut my brain off and only focus on this. And that is just so beneficial. And then, after, when you leave, there's no ever regretting it. Because to that point too, like, your life we're always going to have adversity.
Yes.
And some more than others, but, and I say that in like the kindest way. Some people, you just have like circumstances that seem to work out, or others where they may not. And I think it's how you respond to it that's really important now. And I mean this, so my mom, I didn't know if I was gonna like want to talk about this, but she was recently diagnosed with sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
Thank you.
There you go.
It's like, if anything can make me cry, it's this.
Yeah, but you take your time, and you talk about what you want to talk about, of course.
I know, I appreciate it. She was recently diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer, and that came out of nowhere. Like, this year was going to be, I mean, it still is our year and her year. And I mean, she's one of my best friends, and we talk all the time. Like, me moving here was such a big thing for us, and it was hard at first. Like, I miss her. But we, FaceTime and everything all day. But yeah, she's a model, like a gray-haired model. She's freaking awesome. She's killing it.
I've seen her Instagram. She's wicked.
Yeah, she's wicked. She got signed to an agency in London, and that was her goal. It was like, right, I'm going to get signed so I can come visit you and work and get travel compensated. And like literally within days of her getting her acceptance, she got diagnosed. And so part of it was just like, it just came out of nowhere. And I think old me, how I handled things when my dad passed, and I immediately turned to drinking because that was what I knew to do. But, sober me, I'm like, right, life is still going to happen. Things are still going to be really hard. But it's so much worse if you drink. And it's just, but still, you have those days where it's not that I like necessarily am like, oh, I really could go with some alcohol. It's more of a like, oh, I feel so sad today, or like worried or anxious,
I get those days a lot. And I also like, being open and honest, I just think I'd love to rail some gear and just fucking forget about everything for like 20 minutes. I'd love to just fucking forget about everything because life isn't easy. And I think there's a common misconception with removing alcohol from your life and drugs sorts your life out. It doesn't. It makes your life harder, but it's so much fucking easier than being a slave to this drug that's got so much control over you. It's a much better way of living. And I just want to say, like, your mum and your dad would be so fucking proud of you because what you're doing is amazing. Like, and I think you're a shining example of like overcoming adversity. You just because you're sober, it doesn't mean it's easier. But I think you start to see the light in really, really fucked up and dark situations.
Yeah, you see a lot of like dark truths in things, and you see a lot of like you're just clear-headed, so you know how to handle things, I think, a bit better.
Yeah.
Like, when I got that call, I was still like, what do you mean? Like, blah, blah, blah. I literally jumped on the first plane I could get to Arizona and was there with her for weeks and, still had these like just anxious moments. But like, rather than using that energy to just numb it and like, because alcohol will do that. Like, you can accomplish that. If you don't want to feel anything, you can do that. But it's going to come back. Like, those feelings are going to be there.
Yeah.
I think not dealing with shit doesn't mean it goes away. And so, yeah, I think as a result, it's just like, I'm like, wow, I get to be present now. I get to spend time with her. I have every faith in the world that she's going to overcome it. She's going through the right treatment, and she has amazing doctors and support and an amazing fucking mindset, because that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
But I can look at this situation and be like, right, no matter what happens, I will have been so present. I will do everything I could have done. And like, that is the best way to live.
Yeah, 100%. I think like for me personally, like you said, when you get bits of bad news like that, you start to say like, right, well, let's make the most of like everything and let's be grateful for all the things that we've got. And I think it's just, it's true. And I think sobriety allows you that mental clarity to not go into like catastrophe mode and be like, fuck, everything's fucked. That was my go-to thing. And I used to think the world was against me and it was everyone else's problem. But, you realize that it's not. And the way, like I said, everyone who, loves you and knows you should be so proud of you. Like, I don't even know you, but I'm proud of you, like.
I'm proud of you too.
Yeah, but
look at this amazing thing you're doing,
Yeah, I think you do. You get this like instant connection with people, and I think it's all about overcoming adversity and showing people that just because you're sober, life's not easier. You still got these challenges, but the way that you overcome the challenges is amazing. And I had a question I wanted to ask about your relationship. So how have your relationships changed through sobriety? So, for example, with your partner Joe and obviously your mum and your friends, how have your relationships changed?
The best, in the best way. So starting with my partner Joe, I think he is a real one for loving me through some of the darkest times of who I was. And I was like, if you can fall in love with that version of me, this version is a lot different for the better, I'd hope. We're just, we're open and honest, and we aren't flying off the handle at each other and fighting over dumb stuff like that. When you're drunk, everything's such a big deal. So it's just very peaceful in my relationship. With my parent, my mom, she's, as a result, gone sober herself.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, she's like 6 months. And I'm so proud of her because she has had her struggles. My relationship to alcohol is definitely generational.
Yeah.
My mom's had some, pretty just bad things happen as a result of alcohol. So, I'm really proud of her. And then friendships, like my best friend, who's actually married to my brother.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she's my sister-in-law, and I can say that now because they just got married in March.
That's amazing.
She sat me down back in 2021. Oh my gosh, I'm getting so emotional now.
That's all right. Take your time. Take your time. There's no nothing you have to say or not say. It's all good.
She sat me down back when I was really in the thick of it a couple years ago, and was like, I don't know if I want to be your friend anymore.
Yeah.
Pretty much. She didn't say it like that, but it was very, she's like, you are not pleasant to be around, just because I was so clearly unhappy. And it came from a place of a lot of things, and, very loving and stuff. But that was a moment where I was like, okay, this is a example of a relationship I'm about to lose if I don't kind of get my shit together. And, at the time I was taken aback, but then also very quickly was really grateful that she said something. Because sometimes with relationships, so many little things happen, and then you just get to a point where it's unfixable almost.
You kind of you just say, fuck it, I'm pissed off and I've had enough. It's but you've been feeling like that for months, years, and you just kind of suppressed it.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that she came to me, and I know it wasn't an easy thing to do because I'm quite confrontational. The fact that she did that made all the difference. And so now our friendship's better than ever. I mean, even though it's long distance, she's incredible and so supportive. All my friends are so supportive. And then I've made girlfriends here in England who are just amazing. Whenever I go over to their house, they'll have non-alc beers in the fridge because they know I love non-alc beers. And my friendships the connections are deeper.
Yeah. I resonate with that as well. I think you cut the bullshit out with people, don't you? And you sort of get to know people for who they truly are, and also you're being the authentic version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, people, it takes a while for you to get there, but you kind of think, this is who I am, and people are either going to like it or they're not going to like it, and there's nothing I can do about that. Whereas before, when I was drinking and taking lots of drugs, I would become a social chameleon.
Yeah. And
I would try to fit other people's narrative of me. And I'd be like, this is who my friend John wants me to be. This is who I have to be around my dad. This is who I have to be around Rachel, my partner. This is who I have to be around her parents. And you get to a point of comfortability and just self-acceptance. I think that's the most beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Self-acceptance. You stop hating yourself.
Yeah.
And you stop feeling like you have to be something that you're not. And I think the other thing too, the reason when I got sober, I was like, where is this going? How is this another challenge? It wasn't, that's another thing, is it wasn't I'm definitively going to say I am sober. But then the more I've gone without drinking, I'm like, no, I'm actually sober. And I think because I don't see a world in which I go back, because the one I'm in now is so much better and more rewarding than anything else that I've had up until this point. despite life not always working out, you
Yeah.
know? And so the reason I've kind of decided to be more vocal about it, and I know there's like, you know, sober social media groups and everything, they're the most accepting and like loving community of people.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're all coming from a similar, if not identical place. And the amount, like, as soon as I made this post about my decision 4 months in, the amount of fucking people who messaged me that I knew, that I didn't know, like, saying they were struggling with similar things, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a thing that people don't always talk about.
Yeah, yeah. The stigma is crazy. That's the reason I started this
Yeah.
whole thing, was because I think I struggled for like I didn't go on sober Instagram or like do any of this stuff for like 9 months. So I
Yeah.
kind of secluded myself, and I was hanging around with loads of people that were still drinking and taking drugs. And then like you find this little lovely corner of the world where everybody's so supportive and all they want to do is see you succeed.
Yeah.
And I think like you start to realize as well, the more vulnerable you are with people, like the better the conversations you have with people. And I tend to, like, I don't know what it is, I tend to draw to people, or people, I have conversations with people that I just never would have had
Yeah.
2 years ago. And like, you know, people just start opening up to me and I open up to them and I'm like, fucking hell, like this is crazy.
Yeah, and you're not even
Yeah.
drunk.
I'm like, yeah, where does
Yeah.
this come from? But it's because you both have that instant connection. And you know, like,
Mhm.
you know, like vegans used to like try and say, I'm not vegan, I'm not vegan.
Yeah.
I kind of get it now. It's because they're proud, like they're doing something
Yeah.
which is
It's
aligns
hard.
to their, it's hard and it aligns to their morals and their values.
Yep.
And you know, when you get sober, it's hard and you start to realize what your values are and what your morals are, and you have to stick to them daily.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you feel like you can feel yourself slowly derailing. And I think having that community of people to lean on, for me, has been a fucking game changer. Like, it's made me so much more grateful for the connections that I have
Yeah.
than I wouldn't have before, you know. And I think you made a point earlier about killing time and things like that. And I noticed, I went to a gig last night and there was a bit that you were waiting for the guy to come on and sing,
Yeah.
and loads of people were just drinking and like not being present. They wasn't there. They wasn't actually enjoying the music, and they were doing that because they were killing that piece of time and they don't know what else to do. Rather than like having a nice conversation, me and my partner just went out of the venue and sat down on the bench and like just chatted for a bit and was like, oh, he'll be on soon.
Yeah.
We'll go back. Like, whereas I used to not think that was an option. It was like, oh, you have to drink until you get there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes like just such a norm in everything. On the way here, there was people, I think, are we by a stadium?
Yeah, so there's rugby on this weekend,
Okay.
which is why
They were all on the train.
Yeah.
So you can imagine. And I was like, dear Lord. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a standard. Yeah, I think rugby's pretty savage for beers and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've actually been talking for an hour already,
I can't
believe it or
believe
not.
it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions which I ask everybody at the end of all the podcasts. So the first question is, what is the single best thing that sobriety has brought you?
Peace. I said my relationship is peaceful, but my relationship with myself is also peaceful. Like, just self-acceptance in spades. And the ability to see things clearly. And yeah, I think you just ultimately have such it sounds corny, but life is better. It's brighter.
Yeah.
Things make sense. Things don't make sense, but that's okay. And you start to like look forward to the little things. I know this is going to be so corny, but like,
corny.
I love waking up and looking forward to my morning coffee and like sitting with my dog or like going on a walk and getting fresh air. Like, just life is so much better. I can't explain it.
No, I feel the same. I feel like I'm seeing life in colour again. Like, you lived in black and white for ages. It's like someone like changed the lens on my eyes, and I was like, fuck. Like, and this sounds again mad, but it's like that tree over there is beautiful. I was like, I never noticed that before. And you start to, I think you just become, it's mad. You do become grateful for things that you took for granted, I think.
Yeah.
And then the final question I had is, what is the one piece of advice that you wish you received at the beginning of your sobriety journey that you'd give to someone else at the beginning of theirs?
That even though you're going to feel like it, even though it's going to feel impossible, it is possible, and you aren't alone. Starting is the hardest part.
Yeah.
But like anything, once you get that momentum going, once you get the energy from getting a streak of days behind your belt, download that I Am Sober app and plug your date in and watch it grow. Or sometimes you have to reset it, and that sucks. But like, you will get to a point of being able to just have this piece of where you're at. And I think those are the two biggest things. And you might not find community at first because everyone drinks. Not everyone, us,
Yeah.
a lot of other people, but it's out there. And like, just kind of put yourself out there in that way, and you like won't regret it.
Yeah, no, definitely. But thank you so much for like being so open and so honest, and thank you for sharing everything you shared, because yeah, it's beautiful. And obviously, weirdly, I'm going to say congratulations on a year.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because like, you are going to get there. And
yeah,
I think you made such a good point about the numbers. And like, I people ask me like, why'd you count your days still? Like, you've been sober for 19 months, 20 months. And it's like, because I don't want that number to go to zero. Like, I look at it and I'm like, what is going to feel worse? Like, you know, waking up and going, fuck, all those days are just gone, or having a drink. And it's like, well, actually, I don't want that number to ever to go to zero.
No.
So I'm not going to let it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.